Namaste, beloveds. This is Mother with Wisdom, and this is the third and final video dealing with these moon energies and these downloads. And um, I'm being told to share something with you that I was not planning on doing, but when you receive these um, instructions, you follow through with them where you are led. Uh, I'm led to read to you from chapter 4. It's called Fire in the Voice. This is by the Heart Aroused, and it's written by David Whyte. It's Poetry and the Preservation of the Soul in Corporate America. And I want to begin it with a quote from William Blake. If a fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. And beloveds, I just want to say that that simply means the Fool, as you know, is the first card in the tarot card. The Fool is walking out on faith, stepping out on this precipice where he has to begin his journey and he doesn't know what is ahead of him, but he's trusting and he's just going. And William Blake is saying with that quote that when we have faith, when we surrender to that moment, and when we allow, that is when we become wise. It's in that process that we become wise. It's on that journey that we become wise. Because what we're doing is we're trusting ourselves. We're learning to step into the universal flow of things. And we're accepting that flow to conduct us safely to where we need to be. And that we're going to encounter exactly what we need on that fool's journey, what begins as the fool. And then you go into, the magician and the alchemy and so forth and so on. But let me get to this. The Heart Aroused. And I want to say thank you to Laurel because I borrowed this book from her. And I'm just going to get into it, beloveds. A man I know finds himself in a meeting room at the very edge of speech. He is approaching his moment of reckoning, and he is looking for support from his fellow executives around the table. Strangely, at this point, no one will look at him. The CEO is pacing up and down on the slate gray carpet. He has asked in no uncertain terms for their opinion of the plan he wants to put through. I want to know what you all think about this, he demands, on a scale of 1 to 10. The CEO is testy. He makes it plain. He wants everyone to say 10. And damn whether they mean it or not, he is just plain tired after all this time of people resisting his ideas on the matter. He glares at them. He wants compliance. My friend thinks the plan is terrible and that there is too much riding on this solitary ego. Everyone in the company will lose by it. He is sure also from talk he has heard that half of the other executives in the room think so too. As they go round the shamefaced table, the voices of those present sound alternatively overconfident or brittle and edgy. Most say 10. One courageous soul braves a 9.5, and my friend is the last to go. He reaches his hand toward the flame, opens his palm, and suddenly falters. Against everything he believes, he hears a mouse-like faraway voice, his own, saying, 10. Courageous speech has always held us in awe. From the first time we spoke back to our parents as angry, stuttering teens, or had to stand tongue-tied before a room full of people, feeling naked as the day we were born, there is, after all, something bare and revealing about speech. behind the sound of words and the way they are spoken. And that much against our wishes, our words tell the listener a good deal more than we would have them know about us. The voice, that's why a lot of people don't want to talk to you, because they know you'll read them. The voice emerges literally from the body as a representation of our inner world. It carries our experience from the past, our hopes and fears for the future, and the emotional resonance of the moment. If it carries none of these, it must be a masked voice. And having muted the voice, anyone listening knows intuitively we are not all there. Whether or not we try to tell the truth, the very act of speech is courageous, because no matter what we say, we are revealed. A courageous, soul-filled speech may simply mean accepting the consequences of being revealed. The courage to speak and stand by what we overhear ourselves saying is a learned and often frightening discipline. In the workplace, with all its fears and terrifying hierarchies of power, this courage is something every person feels compelled to learn. In my own tradition, it is also central to the writing of poetry. In our first attempts at courageous speech, in the meeting room or on the empty page, we prepare to roar like a lion and deliver instead the timorous peep of a mouse. Our fist, I'm sorry, our first thought is to withdraw from the mouse in horror. The Pulitzer Prize or the potential promotion cannot lie this way in sounding like the mouse. The mouse sound, wait a minute, Pulitzer Prize or the potential promotion cannot lie this way, we say to ourselves. But there is a place for the mouse. The mouse sound is a sobering sound because we come to realize that it is not something that suddenly rises up and embarrasses us at the wrong moment, but an essential part of our nature, an indicator of our hopes and fears. If mouse is all we have, then the first courageous step might be to say, mouse is what we have to work with. I cannot help but think of Robbie Burns' favorite description of a timorous mouse. He's startled, painted forever in broad Scotch dialect. Wee silkit, cowering, timorous beastie, oh, what a panic's in thy breastie. Wee silkit, cowering, timorous beastie, oh, what a panic's in thy breastie. Having startled the mouse inside ourselves, we might, for instance, see the mouse voice as an indication of what exactly our voice is hiding, and in its minute, brittle sounds intuit a greater voice that lies behind it. And beloveds, this is what emerged with me with Tiamat. My little mouse voice, my little Valerie Ames, my little mother white voice, my little everything else that I have been using was not enough, was not powerful enough to of a self-identification frequency for me to move into the next phase that I needed to be in. And situations occurred that caused that voice to be heard by me. That voice is Tiamat, Tiamat, and Red Dragon energy. And that voice, that is the fire in the voice, okay? If nothing else, that's the fire in the voice, baby. Believe that. Okay, moving on. We also learned something about the fears that lie behind our speaking out. The mouse is the part of us that learned how to hide behind the walls of the house until nightfall, emerging when the master and mistress were asleep. A mouse sound heard in the light of day then is the first indication. that our voice is coming out of hiding, though it may still be fearful of those we perceive to be rulers of our world. Oh, beloveds, 10:10 when I said that. Hearing the mouth's energy in a conversation at work, especially with someone who may have power over us, we are being reminded that mother and father are still very much present in our lives. In psychological language, we have stumbled into the complex that lies at the center of our relationship with our parents or anyone we come across with whom it is difficult to receive ourselves in full. One of the definitions of our parents might be those from whom my true life is kept. Those from whom my true life is kept. That's the modern day version of our parents and how we as their children perceive ourselves and our relationships with them. Those from whom my true life is kept. And that means that's what we're doing with our true mama, with Big Mama, with Source. We're hiding ourselves from her. We're keeping ourselves small. And by doing that, we're having a very hard time relating to the bigness of ourselves, to the greatness that we are, to the macrocosmic beings that we are. We are huge. We are galactic. We are the mice that roar, so to speak. We have to get there. Simply because our life tends to take us away from them, and the pain surrounding that is difficult for them to bear. But as we grow older and leave our parents, we still find ourselves keeping our lives sacrosanct from those who want control over us, from those who wish to make themselves a mother or father in our lives. But we may know how to keep that sacredness only through being a mouse. In poetic language, having heard the mouse, we then learn through those mouse sounds how to coax our mouse out of hiding and begin, however hesitantly, to treat the world or organization as a mythological equal, a peer instead of a parent, or co-partner on the path instead of an all-powerful provider or persecutor. The practice poet, trying to speak to the world on equal terms, becomes, for better or worse, very familiar with his own mouse sounds, and finally comes to expect a fair amount of furtive scurrying and squeaking before the fuller qualities of the voice can open. But the first experience of the mouse can be heartbreaking. We want fire in our belly, and our voice to meet the fire out in the world. But everything that lies to hand, damped by the feverish moisture of fear and self-loathing. The self-loathing is compounded because we feel we have finally been revealed for what we are. I said 10. I must be a mouse. A man can literally hear the old question even as he speaks. Are you a mouse or a man? A woman hearing timidity in her voice might feel herself slipping back to the inherited role of pleasing others at all costs. But there is another, more important aspect to mouse sounds. The frail, vulnerable sounds of which we are capable seem to be essential to a later ability to roar like a lion without scaring everyone to death. Without the compassionate understanding of the fear and trepidation that lie behind courageous speech, we are bound only to our arrogance. Lion sounds that have not grown from the mouse may exude naked power like the angry CEO, but cannot convey any wisdom or understanding lying behind the voice. The roaring sound of someone like the CEO who has not come to terms with the fears of his or her own inner mouse is almost always a form of preemptive attack, used against others as the best means of defense. The lion that roars, that's to push people back. That's that defense mode. The initial step on path of courageous speech then are the first tentative steps on into the parts of us that cannot speak. Entering their shadowy, previously hidden abodes, we discover an interior soul energy that has not seen the light of day in a long time. When we start to be present with that mouse, beloveds, that's when we start to connect with something deeper within ourselves. That's that fire in the voice. And that first voice for most of us comes out as that squeak of a mouse. But it is that squeak that takes you to the next level. That's what this is saying. It has not seen the light of day because we find it hard to like what we hear when we first go in there. The singer beginning to work on her voice wants Maria Callas, but doesn't find it. She finds her abdomen and chest will not open to carry the sound. The actor wants Richard Burton, but his round golden tones have no undercurrent of grief and regret to match those of Burton. And these are old, very old school references, beloved. Most of you don't even know who Richard Burton or Maria Callas is. The person low on the office totem pole wants the voice of authority, but has not yet found the place in his body where it resides. We want only one side of the equation, the same side of the equation with the overreaching hierarchy of the corporation wants of us: control, consistency, and predictability. Like the corporation, we want every voice but the cracked and slightly broken voice we must first call our own. Finding a voice. The voice, like the eyes in the face, is traditionally a window to the soul. If, as Gerald de Narville said, the seat of the soul is not inside a person or outside a person, but the very place where they overlap and meet with their world. Excuse me. Then the voice is a good candidate as any for getting the measure of our soul life. The voice carries the emotional body of the person speaking, without verbal explanation, but simply through sound. It tells us who is speaking, and in the meeting room, who has come to work. The voice is as important to our identity as anything we possess. We ask ourselves if we really have a voice in this organization. Want reassurance that we can give voice to our opinions, and if we cannot, speak sotto voice, quiet voice, to those few in whom we choose to confide. In the simple act of saying 10 to those listening around the meeting table, we focus an interior current of air from the larynx out through a slight gap between our vocal cords. Like wind sawing through a high pass, the air resonates the chords, and with the help of the tongue, forms the words that order or break apart our existence. A woman's chords resonate at a higher frequency than the bass note of a man, but the throat, like a mountain pass, is only a focus for the moving current of air behind it. The voice itself is dependent on the fullness of the air mass that passes through the slender gap, and that fullness is made by the whole body. Beloveds, I hope you're catching the elemental and the alchemy in what is being given to you. Air, fire, all of this is very important. Opera singers and performers quickly learned that sound is produced by the full length of the body. The lungs work in concert with the belly, and the belly sits like a crossroads between the legs and the upper torso. The throat may be perfectly free, but sit down to sing, and you will produce a different note, a different, more curtailed sound than standing. Open the chest, round the belly with the whole breath. Drop your center of gravity and plant your feet on the floor, and you will sound grounded and solid, a whirl away from your voice when you are strutting tensely on tiptoe. Not only that, but hearing the literal body language in these opposing voices, others will actually treat you differently, as if dealing with two entirely separate people. And beloveds, I want you to know that this is corporate. This is what they teach. This is how they instruct each other. This is how they market, and this is how they get your money. Corporate America wants your money, so they need to know how to speak to you. They need to know what you will hear, what you will identify with, what will reach you. All of this is about using the voice that you will hear, using the voice that will fire up something inside of you so that you will compete or buy or speak up or do something. It's to cause an action. The voice, after all, is entering the body of the listener and radically affecting his inner world. The word 10, for instance, is focused by the outer funnel of the ear, gathered on the membrane of the eardrum, and passed through a watchmaker's arrangement of three tiny bones to the salty fluid of the inner ear. This minuscule inner sea responds to the sound the way the real sea responds to the moon. Shifting with tidal currents, hundreds of tiny hairs rooted in the auditory nerve cells. The emotional and imaginal world radiates out from those ear follicles through the whole length of the body on a tide of electrical impulses, warming the heart, thickening the stomach, or stimulating the adrenals in an instant to fight or flight. As I was reading this, I was taken back to this card. And I believe this card I don't know if it was in the first or the third, but this just came to life with what I'm reading, beloveds. Imagine if my friend had said to the fury of the CEO, 0. On a scale of 1 to 10, 0. There is a world of difference in the bodies of startled executives hearing 0 pronounced into the room and those a hesitant 10. The word 0 would pass through the listeners like an emotional shock wave, galvanizing some to further acts of cowardice and others to the courage of their convictions it brings to mind, like the Chinese pictograph for crisis, intimations of danger and opportunity. The word 10, like a finger in the collapsing dike of truth, a feeling of futility, a kind of bodily and emotional shrinkage. But the 0 would have to come from a person who was inhabiting his entire body, his belly as much as his throat. Otherwise, the 0 comes across like a flagged semaphore of fear. It says to the assembled male executives, I am not completely sure of myself. Eat me now. One gulp. Inhabiting the full body, the long body, as many North American native traditions say, with the voice may be one of the great soul challenges of adult life. If the voice originates and ends its journey in the body of the speaker and listener, it is also true that many parts of our bodies are struck deaf or dumb from an early age. We walk through the door into the corporation every morning looking like full-grown adults, but many parts of us are still playing emotional catch-up. The griefs and traumas of childhood follow us around asking for attention. It is generally accepted in modern psychology that children suffering emotional trauma unconsciously refuse to grow any older until that trauma is resolved. They do not want to hear anything more on the matter. It is just too painful. And this is where many of us find ourselves, beloveds. Or we might more acutely say that that part of a child which is traumatized or threatened refuses to grow older. The rest of the psyche may grow and mature, closing like a particular callus around the wound, but the wound itself remains isolated. This wound is more often than not located in a specific part of the body, one that can no longer speak. Certain voices inside us may grow, may act and sound, even in the company of fellow professionals, like a frightened 7-year-old. We look around at work and see outwardly self-possessed and seem outwardly self-possessed adults, but know from long experience that the layer of composure and control can be very thin. A professional environment seems especially conducive to the appearance of the wounded child. Did you hear that? Corporations, professional environments seem especially conducive to the appearance of the wounded child. All the components of control and pleasing are present in good measure, ready to trigger the emotional allergic reactions that do everything that bring us out in a rash. We try to speak calmly in an emotionally charged situation and find ourselves struggling with the unconscious forces surging in the pit of our stomach. As a child, a person may have disowned any feeling in the stomach area. For instance, having had their joyous, breathly sounds constantly curtailed by the adult rulers of their world. Be quiet. Shh. Hush. Stop making that noise. Shut up. Sit down. Go outside and play. Be quiet. A child shouts from the stomach. An adult jolts the child with a cutting phrase. The child experiences the worst of all scenarios in this disapproval, an irrational, or at times an all too accurate feeling of love being withdrawn from them. As if feeling love, as if for feeling of love. Wait a minute. Grounding, grounding, grounding. They just insist on doing this landscaping today. The child experienced the worst of all scenarios in this disapproval, an irritation, or at times an all too accurate feeling of love being withdrawn from them as if forever. Did you get that, beloveds? This feeling that the corporation dealing with this inner child, when we are lectured or put on the spot, we feel that love is being taken from us, being withdrawn from us. Instead of being deposited, it's being withdrawn, it's being taken away from us. In fear of this, the child identifies the now knotted stomach as the source of the problem and withdraws from the quality the stomach can bring into the voice, refusing its gifts in order to forestall the possibility of returning to a place that seemed to cause the collapse of their world. We give in. Instead of protesting, instead of saying, wait a minute, you just took a little piece of my soul by telling me to shut up, or that I'm getting on your damn nerves, or I'm just sitting here playing, being innocent and being a child, and you come and spew and rip it from me. And now I'm afraid to speak up because of what you did before, what you do every time. And I'm conditioned now. My gut has me conditioned in this space of I'm all tight and balled up and I want to speak, but I'm afraid to speak. The result is that the voice lifts out of the belly and into the upper regions of the chest and the throat where it is more in the grasp of the strategic mind and more amenable to being nice, not being able to go through the painful door into the belly, where an important part of the breath and the sound resides, the place in the body where we go to ground and earth our speech. We cannot get to its courageous rooted sounds when they are needed. To be able to say zero with conviction rather than fear needs the courage resident in the belly as much as it is resident in our convictions. This year started with ground zero for me, beloveds. This is taking me back. It's getting me refocused and recentered from where I veered off. And some more, well, I didn't veer. There were lessons that needed to be learned about my voice, about my identity. They were experiences that I needed. They were, it took me back down to that mouse part of myself was saying, but then saying, wait a damn minute. My name is Valerie Ames Middlebrook. That's my voice. That's my identity. How dare you? Saying the word zero then entails not just the pronunciation of a word, but a re-entry into neglected portions of the body, soul retrieval, that can uphold the challenge and stand by it. Our soul at this point, if we are dealing with the stomach, literally depends on the courage resident in our guts. A courageous word itself is an act, and a word spoken with the whole body, the literal wish to embody that act. There is, of course, a place for saving one's ammunition, for choosing one's battles, working undercover. There's a price to be paid for that strategy, but sometimes it may be justifiable. The point here is that to my friend, this was a battle worth fighting. This was the time to find out if he had a voice. He had seen that it was time to stake his claim and speak decisively, despite the obvious consequences. His courage failed him at that moment because he realized that the part of him that would say zero wanted a different life and destiny from the one he had now, and he was not yet ready to change. The fire of enthusiasm for this new life, he suddenly realized, would burn the house of his present identity to the ground. He saw in an instant that he was not prepared yet to leave the comfort of which he had become accustomed. He was just as afraid of that voice saying zero as the CEO was. Recounting the story later, he said, in knowing self-reflection, you bet your life, I said 10. The people who hear themselves say zero do not have the same life ahead of them as those who gave the hesitant 10. Saying zero literally means they have guts and their voice is resident in their guts. They have a vessel to hold their fire. Tiamat. They have a stomach for the consequences. I can get through this. I can endure. I can survive. I done been through these fires. Bring it. They have a stomach for the consequences, a place to which their voice can belong no matter the outward change in circumstances. I know who I am. Ambition is not rejected, but placed in the greater perspective of the soul, which again and again seems to choose a fuller experience of the here and now over a preordained trajectory through the organizational heavens. Through the matrix, you rise because of your voice, because of speaking your truth, and because of setting your intentions to grow and to always speak your truth. If zero is the truth, you speak zero. If you just want to go along with the crowd and fit in, you say 10. Never been a 10 sayer. Always 0, 5. The executive who is ambitious at all costs finds himself ritually killed by the sharpness of his own voice. The right word said almost against his will at the right time. 45. Out of that annihilation rises another person, wilder, less predictable to others, but more trustworthy to himself, stepping out on and deciphering a path he could at least call his own. But the courage in saying 0 comes from the fact that we have only a hazy intuition of that person now coming to life who will pick up the pieces and carry on. It demands a simultaneous familiarity with two opposing sides of ourselves. When we are more used to choosing one and ignoring the other. The mouse or Tiamat the dragon, Valerie. And 0 is in the middle for you. And where do you situate yourself? How do you choose which voice to use? How do you know which voice to choose? Because whichever voice you choose is also going to have an impact on who you use it on. So it's a deep construct. It's a deep situation, but once you analyze it and put yourself through it and move through it and find your frequency in it, you get a lot more fluid and it becomes second nature. It's becoming second nature now that you've identified what you need to do. My friend had already figured out in his mind that the CEO's plan was not a good one. But the fire in our belly literally goes out until we find the courage or the circumstances to walk back into those parts of our bodies we have disowned and claim their earthy, grounded qualities for our own again. We have to reclaim our identities. This is what the ancients told us. Know thyself. And your voice is yourself. Your true voice is yourself. And you have to distinguish between the egoic voice and the spiritual voice. You have to be able to distinguish the lesser light and the fuller light. Sometimes we have so disowned our bodies in the cerebral machinations of the corporate world that a phase like walk back into the body may not compute. I am in my body, we say. Where else is there to be? But the question must then be, which body? The body we use like a machine to get everything done, or the body Blake described as chief outlet of the soul in our age. The body as an entangled way of perception and experience, or a door set against the world. Blake himself worked all his life through art and poetry to open up that door. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern. Blake, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. William Blake, like my friend in the meeting room 200 years later, had to walk back into his own body, into his own unconscious physical memories, to cleanse the muddy doors of perception and articulation. Arriving there, Blake found them shut against him. He describes this in a brilliant but sobering poem called The Garden of Love. The Garden of Love. I went to the Garden of Love and saw what I had never, what never, I went to the Garden of Love and saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst where I used to play on the green. and the gates of this chapel were shut, and thou shalt not write over the door. So I turned to this garden of love that so many sweet flowers bore, and I saw it was filled with graves and tombstones where flowers should be, and priests in black gowns were walking their rounds and binding with briars my joys and desires. We turn to our inner garden and find it full of dead bodies, closed and with a sign over the door of the chapel, "Thou shalt not." And priests in black gowns were walking their rounds and binding with briars my joys and desires. Unable to enter the garden, the wounded child remains in limbo, its desires bound by briars, unable to experience the joys of its birthright or to grow into maturity with the rest of the adult psyche. It finds that a mode of being it was forced to employ during a stressful period when young, simply in order to survive, has become a part of the imprisoning personality of the grown adult. Children or not, we have all experience of this trauma to the body and the difficulty in opening those parts of ourselves that clanged shut so firmly in order to survive. It is a common but disturbing experience to hear our voice revert to old childhood timbers when we are but into fearful or vulnerable situations. Caught in the tension of a high stress presentation, we might find ourselves playing out the same essential soul struggles we had as children with our parents or teachers, especially with those figures of authority who now dominate our work lives. Blake's priests in blacks gowns are with us eternally. And beloveds, I'm just going to say this because I have not been able to get away from the Five of Cups in the tarot reading. It is holding me spellbound. Um, and I say that because that is, when I say I'm spellbound, that is where my attention, Spirit has directed me to focus my attention, is on that Five of Cups. Because there are a total of 5 cups in the picture. But the figure, I don't have it, the tarot Rider-Waite deck in front of me to show you this, but the figure is of a person wearing a long black cloak, and there are 3 cups that are overturned, and he's staring, his head is down, and he or she is looking at those cups that have spilled, and they're grieving over them. They're deeply grieving over them. The child in them is grieving over them. They feel despondent over these 3. They blame themselves that they're knocked over and what's in them will not be used or is not any good anymore. And they've completely turned their back to what they have to yet to be grateful for. And that's those 2 other cups. You still have 2 other cups that are full of spiritual gifts and things and journeys and adventures and explorations, and it's full of wisdom for you to digest and integrate. You do not have to turn yourself off. You do not have to die or empty yourself and be done with those 3 cups. You have to remember, that's only a part. That's only a portion. That portion has served. It's done. Let it go. Move forward. Turn around. You got 2 more cups. 2 more in this life. 2 more things you can manifest. 2 more abilities. 2 more powers. Two more. 2 is unity. 2 and you makes 3. Okay? Be the divine child. Come through those 2 cups. Understand what you need to do. Turn your back on what's behind you and what's spilt and what's past. Let it go. And if there are others there that are corded to you and are always trying to pull you back, cut them cords. If you got to do it every day at a certain time of day, that's your ritual. I cut these cords. Psh, that's simple. In your mind, you see certain time or you see numbers repeating. When you do that, I cut the cords. I cut the cords to everything that's not in my highest good, my evolution, or me growing. People, places, circumstances, things. I cut my ties to them as I need to rise now. And they hold me down, hold me back. State your intentions for yourself. This is how you program yourself. This is how you assume your authentic identity and role. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Unable to enter the garden, the wounded child remains in limbo. It desires. Okay, I'm not going to read that over. Every manager. Sorry. Sorry, beloved. Sorry. Let me start back over here. Children or not, we all have experience of this trauma to the body and the difficulty in opening those parts of ourselves that cling shut so firmly in order to survive. It is a common but disturbing experience to hear our voice revert to our old childhood timbres when we are put into fearful or vulnerable situations. Caught in the tension of a high stress presentation, we might find ourselves playing out the same essential soul struggles we had as children. Dun, dun, dun! With our parents or teachers, especially with those figures of authority who now dominate our work lives. Blake's priests in black gowns are with us internally. We carry them with us wherever we go. If we do not find them literally in another person, we will project them onto those who look as though they might do in a pinch. Every manager has had to deal with people who are absolutely allergic to any kind of direction, seeing in a simple request the hand of an internal bully with whom they have yet to come to terms. We carry these internal taskmasters with us because the soul is desperate to speak its desires in their presence and thus be freed from their rule. Soul retrieval. Go get your parts back. Go let your parts talk to them. You bring your adult self there with your child self. You stand next to it. And you let that child self experience, tell it. Say what you need to say, baby. I'm right here with you. I got you. Say what you need to say to that part that hurt you, to that person that hurt you. In your mind, on a letter, however you need to do it. Speak, put that fire in your voice and let it transmute those poisons, those toxins, those blockages that have you, so you're not speaking with your true voice. You're holding back from fear of whatever. Only you know what your fears are. We carry these internal taskmasters with us because the soul is desperate to speak its desires in their presence and thus be freed from their rule. That's where we are with the elite. Until then, the part bound with briars can never escape, experience joy, or grow to maturity. We will forever be sheep until we learn how to speak and mean it. The psychological view of the situation would be to say that we are projecting our fears onto parental figures, particularly those at work whom we feel have power over us and must overcome this tendency. But the soul's view might be to see these trauma as constantly repeated opportunities for courageous articulation. That's that warrior. That's that spiritual warrior in you. That no matter what happens, that's a lesson, baby. What's there? Look at it. Turn it over. Flip it upside down. Hold it to the light. What you see, what you feel, what you know, what it say. Make it say something to you. Make it teach you something. But the soul's view might be to see these traumas as constantly repeated opportunities for courageous articulation, opportunities that the soul takes endless pains to engineer and place in our way until we step back through the doors of perception, back into the life promised to us before we sealed ourselves outside. We may think we are in the meeting room to preserve our job and our career, while at bottom, the soul is making another bid for first-hand experience through courageous speech. I said zero, damn it. You just wait until that voice comes out automatically. It has no interest in being right. It simply intuits another life in the word zero. Beloveds, this is blowing my mind. I had not read this. I just got this book from Laurel. So this is intuition working. This is spirit working. And as I'm reading this, I wish if you could see auras, you would see me going disco ball right about now. I'm sure of it. Because that's what it feels like. For courageous articulation opportunities that the soul takes endless pains to engineer and place in our way until we step back through the doors of perception, back into the life promised to us before we sealed ourselves outside. 5234. We may think we are in the meeting room to preserve our job and our career, while at the bottom the soul is making another bid for first-hand experience through courageous speech. It has no interest in being right. It simply intuits another life in the word zero, folded in on itself by our strategies for survival. It is trying to open as much of its hidden interior surface area as possible. As Rilke said, where I am folded in upon myself, there I am a lie. Where I am folded in on myself, where you double in on yourself, where you really hiding your true reflection, where cloaking, that's where the lie is. I remember walking with a companion on a lonely road outside the small town of Otavalo in northern Ecuador. Turning a corner, we stumbled without warning into a wayside celebration of Otavalan Indians, drunk on corn beer. Corn mother. Quickly catching sight of us, they turned very nasty very quickly, suddenly surrounding and threatening us with fists, rocks, and machetes. I recall using every ounce of my silent will to hold them at bay. While we them, while we walked through them on that dusty road, both of us, as far as I could see, marching toward a very violent end. We walked for what seemed an eternity like this, saying nothing as they worked themselves into an ecstasy of pent-up hatred at our presence. At the moment when the shouts and threats were reaching fever pitch, a ramshackle bus appeared out of nowhere. careening toward us over an open field. It stopped within running distance, and with a sudden shout we sprinted toward its door, pounding up its steps as a full side of rocks and missiles thudded against the metal side of the bus. Saved by this rusted angel of deliverance, I spent the next 2 days confined to my bed with stomach pains. The pains were incredibly sharp, and the trauma of that strained confrontation with the angel of death so strong that I could feel my body revolt against the ruthlessness of a world that would kill me as soon as look at me. It was focused on my stomach, perhaps because the truth was so hard to digest. I had done or said nothing that could have warranted attack. As an individual, my intentions were entirely good, but there was nothing my individual presence could do to stem the inheritance of 500 years of exploited bitterness. So they were in spirit, and here were these corporate Americans out here in their environment lollygagging, and they looked at, oh, we about to and because the angels sent them that bus. I love it. I love it. I love it. I've had situations like that, to be saved by the hairs of your chinny chin chin. It gives you another perspective. I remember noting soon after my convalescence that my voice had changed, and I was no longer up in my throat, ready to be given away and please others so readily. It settled into my stomach, along with my breath, bequeathing me a weight and acceptance in my voice that I had not previously known. But there was also a troubled quality underneath that acceptance that did not make it passive. My voice could suddenly allow the presence of darker hidden energies I had previously left unexplored when I was that little mouse, just allowing. Ding. But now I done been through something. I done digested it. I know I got some more fortitude in me. I got some energy in me. I speak from a different place now. I walk with a new energy. How that song go? I got a new way of wearing my hair, a new way of walking, all of that good stuff. When you come into your own identity, your own authority, and your own power, is beautiful. Okay. It is as if my stomach had held my breath and my voice at a distance until that time, not wishing to be reminded that the process of living itself is a form of violation. I was, in Rilke's words, folded in on myself in self-protection against the terrible truth. We are born half strangled and choking for air, grow up invaded by sickness, are battered by mortgages, unwanted bills, and difficult circumstances as adults, and in old age must prepare for the ultimate violation and indignity of hospital deathbed. In effect, the traumatic circumstances on that South American road opened against my will, a part of my body long closed. And through the pain of that opening, I was enabled to walk back in and inhabit a part of myself I had long neglected. It involved not only taking on new powers, but the giving up of my youthful illusions of immunity. Saying no as a path to soul, letting go of our immunity as the be all and end all of our lives, we claim the trouble but integral voice of the soul, ready to say the strangest, most eccentric things at the opportune moment and change our lives in an instant. But there is a method to its madness. The same voice that will say no to the CEO will also say no to the new car and the larger house that makes us scared to death of losing our income and thus render us powerless to speak out. Not that the soul is puritanical about our expenditures, but if the voice is embodying the soul's desires, it will say no again and again to the false seductions that lead us off on the path of fear and material and aggrandizement. Know yourself, beloveds, and know when something is pulling you to somewhere that's not your reality, that's someone else's reality. That's someone else's values. It's not your values, it's what they value. Stay true to you. If we have a little idea of what we really want from our lives or what a soulful approach to our work might mean, then often the only entrance we have into soul comes from the ability to say a firm no to those things we intuit lead to a loss of vitality. This way is traditionally known as via negativa or negative road. Not to be confused with those contemporary deadly sins in the organization of negativity or pessimism. The via negativa is the discipline of saying no, when we have as yet no clarity about these things to which we can say yes. We take the via negativa when there is not yet any sign of the via positiva. But in the continuous utterance of the no is a profound faith that the yes will appear. Not only is it bound to turn up by the law of averages, but it will also appear because we have said no to so much. In a way, if we treat our destiny as a potential marriage, it chooses us as much as we choose it. And like a seeker for our hand, deems us to be serious about it through our continued refusal of the wrong suitors. We create in effect a kind of energetic vacuum into which something we recognize can appear. Eventually appearing like an old and loving memory, it becomes all the more recognizable and real for its long absence. For me, beloveds, that's unconditional love. I've made room for it and I've seen what's not. And I spend less and less time with what's not because I know not you're not. And it's about moving forward and allowing, allowing, and being focused enough where you can recognize what is working for you without making excuses. Because as an empath, I'll make excuses and I'll put up and I'll have patience with things long past the point of sanity. Um, Simply because I know what it is, and I feel that whatever I'm dealing with is a mirror. It is a lesson. It is something for me to see something in, and I need to see it, and I need to take the time to see it, and I need to be able to look at it the way I need to. And if it does not allow me to see it and to be in that space where I'm comfortable, then no, 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 no. I don't believe it's been another hour, y'all. Goodness. The experience, this experience of a kind of deep memory may be more real to us than 1,000 new experiences, one after another, as T.S. Eliot wrote in a brilliant and painstaking way. I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. Wait without love, for love would be love for the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and the love and the hope are all in the waiting. One way to say, one way to come to yes is to say no to everything that does not nourish and entice our secret inner life out into the inner world. As Relke said again, I want to be with those who know secret things, or else alone. We say no in order, and if somebody, all they can do is repeat back to you what you're saying to them, you're not going to know no secret things from them. They have nothing to offer you in that manner because they're drawing from you. And it's not a mutual thing. What do you draw from them? It's one-sided. Don't stay in something that's one-sided. You're worth more than that. We say no in order to bud and blossom. I didn't write this book. We say no in order to bud and blossom in our own time, when saying yes might force us like a lighthouse flower into a premature or effervescent bloom. We guard the richness of our interior hopes and imaginings, even when there as yet seems to be nothing in the outer world that confirms them. When finally we do blossom, we may bear fruit in the most surprising and astonishing ways. No becomes yes. Some years ago, during a weekend course I helped to lead in the south of England, I experienced a moving example of how via negativa can blossom. The course was unusual for me, to say the least, in that I was the only man working among 33 medical missionary sisters. There's that number 33 again. 6. This weekend was part of a 6-week rest and recuperation for missionary nuns who had returned exhausted from their work in the hinterlands of Peru, Indonesia, India, and whatever other country needed the benefit of their good work and clinics. Their work was difficult and exhausting, delivering babies, inoculating children, caring for the old and the sick. You cannot fault their endeavors. Yet, as they say in the Christian tradition, they were all Martha and no Mary. They had absolutely no way of replenishing themselves. The medical missionary sisters had little or no contemplative or prayerful discipline in their daily work. Every nun who went out worked herself into the ground for 2 years and then came back completely depleted. Working with the sisters, we could not help but be moved by their work and in despair at the mere shadows they had made of themselves to do it. Down in the kitchen of the convent, all the while, like Cinderella among the ashes, hidden away from our seminar room, was the young woman who served our meals every day. I say young, for although she seemed to be about 27 years old, it transpired in our conversations that she was in her early 40s. I was amazed, not only by her youthfulness, but by the glowing spirit of calmness and serenity she had about her work. It became the high point of each day, almost like a privilege, to go down there and spend a few minutes with her as she served out the food. She seemed like a bright, shining light in the dim underground dining hall, and she never had a bad word for anything or anyone. It turned out that she had been a member of the Poor Clare order for over 20 years. The Poor Clares are a silent, prayerful order with an almost Zen-like approach to spirituality, spending much of their time in silent contemplation. She had entered the order at 18 and spent more than 2 decades in contemplation. Even the work of the convent was done by the sisters all working in mutual silence. Finally, after 23 years, alone in her cell, she had heard an inner voice telling her to go out in the world and work on the behalf of others. Following that voice without hesitation, have a good one, sweetie. Following that voice without hesitation, she had joined the order that was hosting our weekend and came to the convent as part of her initial training. The whole experience was something of a culture shock for her. But she had not a bad thing to say about her new order. Though its whole approach was foreign to her training, there was not a trace of spiritual materialism in her body. I would hear her apologize to the others for appearing to ignore them when she worked in silence. It's hard for them, she would say, so I must keep explaining that silence means something else to me. Not a shred of judgment on her part as to their lack in the art of contemplation. Witnessing her profound spiritual presence, I couldn't help but think, here was a woman who would never burn out, no matter how much she applied herself to the outer world. She had an inexhaustible inner light that would endure through the direst of circumstances. She had come to that light through the ability to say no to everything except the thing most precious to her. An inner focus based on her personal spirituality and the religious life to which she had given herself. Out of those years of saying no, blossomed a magnificent yes. Magnificent because she would be nourishing much more than the physical health of those she would care for. A yes that could be followed fully because after all those years gathering her psyche into one single body of faith, every part of her would be uttering it. Yes. Though the other sisters were saving lives every day, the overwhelming feeling was that they were doing this work because there was something wrong with the world that needed to be put right, whereas this youthful hidden saint was doing it because everything was right about the world, and she wanted others to experience it that way too. Her faith in her natural unfoldment and her own no took her to the farthest end of aloneness and then led her back in a moving return to human community. Sounds like my story. She, of course, would have made none of the fuss that I have made about her journey. For her, it was one step at a time, one word at a time, one silence at a time, for 23 years. 5. Through the average life in our place of work has little of the natural sanctity found in the vows of religious life. The same internal imperatives work through each of us, no matter our surroundings. Our soul and our personal destiny are equally at stake. Whether we are articulating our life in a management or the monastery, if we make our life vows consciously, we must speak them again and again in order not to forget. If they are as yet unconscious, the soul will work to uncover them by pushing us towards situations that demand us to explain ourselves. We can look at the pressures of corporate life in a pathological sense, stressful without sense or sensibility, or we can see it as the tempting element that unites the articulation of personal destiny with the urgent and pragmatic concerns of the everyday. Wow, I love that. We cultivate an inner life knowing that what is most important to us must be spoken and made real in the outer world. And in doing what, we also gain a hard-won respect for the inner life and visions of others, and the courage it takes to speak to them in our presence. By saying no, we can to many of the activities and things that come our way. We are continually thrown back on ourselves. By learning who it is at the center of all this activity, we find in ourselves someone who can say yes, and at the same time be truly wholehearted. In the corporate world, there is so much pressure to say yes, even if we are only halfway there. Disapproval from the wrong quarter can be deadly for prospects and advancement. We're so worried about the criticism and disapproval, and the need for validation will say anything. Our intuitive reaction may be no, but without a full-bodied reply to back it up. We dislike simply sounding negative, yes or no. The voice throws us back on what we want for our life. It forces us to ask ourselves, who is speaking? Who came to work today? Who is working for that? What do I really care about? Our voice then is a powerful arbiter of our inner life, our power, relationships with others, and a touchstone of faith in the life we wish to lead. In the office, we can experience the disciplines of speech and the inner silence from which good speech appears as a measure of soul in our lives. Sometimes the voice is cowardly, sometimes courageous, and more often somewhere between the two. But whatever its outward appearance, tempered by the pressures of organizational life, it represents the urgencies, desires, or emotional strangulation of a soul longing to be heard in the world. And beloved, that was chapter 4, and that was Fire in the Voice. And again, this is David Whyte, The Heart Aroused. David Whyte, The Heart Aroused. And you can see the little angel there sitting on the head. That is going to do it for this video, beloveds. And I just want to say thank you so much for everything. There is tremendous potential right now for growth, for evolution, for expansion of your soul force, your life force, and your spirit life force. And it's best if we start speaking our truths, beloveds. Because when we speak our truth, that helps us to empower and identify who we are as beings and who we are becoming as beings. So speak up for yourself, whether it's in that mouse voice or that lion's roar. Speak your piece. Speak your piece. And if you have to work your way through that, start speaking it to yourself. Start looking in the mirror and start speaking it. Start projecting that strength onto yourself. Start identifying that bigger, larger part of you that can stand next to you, behind you, inside of you, mantling you, however you choose to see your guardian angel standing with you, or your hero, or your guides, or your God, or whatever you can envision. Make it work, beloved. It comes from you, comes from within you. That is where your hope is, within yourself. And you give birth to it by speaking your truth. And establishing your character. Use integrity, beloveds. And when you make mistakes, own up to them. Own up to them. That will cut the karma. That will also bring blessings and balance things out. Okay, that's going to do it. Namaste. Thank you. This reading was kind of long, and if you need to go over it to read it, do so. If you need to get the book, I advise you to do so. It's like you just heard. It's very powerful. Okay, that's going to do it. Namaste. Thank you. Abundant blessings. And find your true, authentic voice. And free your inner children who have suffered trauma from their cages. And rescue them from those who took parts and pieces of them. And may still have them. Use your no and your yes. Even if it's just in your head. Okay, I love you all.